Huawei has been in the mobile industry for as long as I can remember, but for the biggest part of its history making mobile devices, it was manufacturing phones for other companies and carriers. Now it wants to make a name for itself. Never has that been more apparent than at its launch event for the Huawei P8. I attended that event a few weeks ago, and since then I've been living with the P8. I'm Cam from PhoneDog.com, and here is my review. If there's one standout component of the Huawei P8, it's the design. From an aesthetic perspective, it's beautiful. All four anodized aluminium finishes have their appeal, whether you go for the Mystic Champagne, Titanium Grey, Carbon Black, or Prestige Gold. The polished chamfered edges are attractive and contrast well with the softer anodized finish on the edges. The back is almost entirely metal apart from the glass panel at the top and the plastic antenna band on the bottom. It's also incredibly slim at just 6.4mm thick. It feels light in hand but doesn't feel flimsy at all. It has a pretty solid feel to it. From the front with the screen off, it has a very striking look. In fact, you'd be forgiven for thinking that it has a genuine edge-to-edge display. Sadly, however, it's an illusion. Switch the phone on and you'll notice a black frame all the way around the edges of the actual display panel. And if you have a really dark wallpaper, you might not even notice it. But I couldn't unsee it after I had. The right edge features two card trays, one SIM and one microSD. There's also a volume rocker, and the power button sits inside its own shallow groove and is finished with a concentric circle pattern on top for texture. All of these have an attractive finish. Even parts of the software and user interface have been nicely designed. There are lots of attractive fine lines and animations. Just switching the device off is pleasant to do, as is updating the software. But the user interface poses its issues. Although attractive, the standard Huawei launcher doesn't feel like it makes full use of Android's customizability. Even when you install and use a custom launcher like Yahoo's Aviate or Google Now launcher, you're still stuck with the Huawei app icons. Instead of just allowing any custom shape icon, it puts a color-matched rounded square behind it. What's more, with Huawei's own launcher, there's no app drawer. Everything is on the home screens or in folders. It looks like a weird cross between iOS and Android. App folders open in their own screen, and the drop-down menu has two screens. There's even a mini control center that comes up from the bottom in the lock screen. In some ways, it reminds me a lot of the days when I used to jailbreak my iPhone. And that's not always a bad thing. But I have a feeling that if you buy this, you're either going to love it or hate it. Apart from the black gap around the edges, this 5.2-inch 1080p display is actually rather good. It's sharp and clear, colours are plenty vivid enough and accurate at the same time. What's more, the viewing angles are superb. It doesn't seem to lose much brightness. Even when looking at it from a narrow angle, content looks good on screen. Whites are still clean and everything is clear. I have no issue with saying this is one of the best LCD panels I've used so far. And at 424 pixels per inch it's really sharp, and the fine lines in the operating system make the most of that. If there's one area that really disappointed me with the Huawei, it's the performance. It has been one of the most unreliable Android phones I've used this year. Apps that need to run in the background, like Strava's running app, cut off after about 10 minutes or so, meaning my running sessions aren't tracked properly, unless I then go into a bespoke menu and decide I want to switch that on and make sure it's always running. I've also seen multiple app crashes, and some just don't load data properly, leaving me with incorrect or incomplete information. And although attractive, some of the user interface controls didn't work properly or reliably. For instance, the screen brightness slider in the drop-down menu was the most frustrating I've ever had to use. 80% of the time, maybe even more, instead of detecting I was sliding the toggle, it would switch to the notification screen in the drop-down menu instead. Apart from those issues the performance was generally good. Web pages load quickly and transitioning between screens and apps was smooth. That's probably no surprise to anyone given that it has an octa-core processor built in. For the spec-hungry among you, that is the high-silicon Kirin 930 processor made up of two quad-core processors. One of those is a 2.0 GHz and the other one is a 1.5 GHz. It also has 3 GB of RAM. But onto battery life, and thanks to its software improvements and clever use of processor power, the P8 has exemplary battery life. Its 2680 mAh cell may not sound like much on paper, but even with pretty heavy use, I struggle to use it up in a day. Huawei promises it will get to a day and a half with regular use, so even the heaviest of users should easily make it through one workday. A big part of this phone's launch event was the camera. It's a 13 megapixel sensor and comes with optical image stabilization and a dual LED True Tone flash. But more importantly, Huawei wants you to use its handful of cool creative features. You can paint with light using its slow exposure tools, use the low light function to take pictures in the dark, or shoot time-lapse videos. As for quality, you get what you'd expect from an f-stop 2 brand new Sony RGBW sensor, which is to say it's pretty great. Daylight images are sharp and clear, even if the colours aren't as lively as some may like them to be. And as you'd expect from a phone camera, low light images can be a little on the noisy side, but not terrible. Overall, it's a great camera. It might not be quite as good as the Galaxy S6, but it's great nonetheless. As a wrap, the Huawei P8 is an unusual case where you get exceptional hardware put together with temperamental, although attractive software. If this came loaded with stock Android, it could be one of the best phones on the market right now, quite easily. But given my experience with using the device over the past weeks and how frustrated it made me a lot of the time, I find it hard to recommend. Thankfully, improving software and performance should be as simple as releasing regular updates. At least the company got the one thing right you can't do anything about after launch, and that's the hardware. I've been Cam from PhoneDog.com. I'm at PhoneDog_Cam on Twitter. You can follow me, tweet me. Of course, you can use the comments in the section down below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to our videos if you do, of course, like them. I'll see you again soon.